Hi, welcome to today's webinar. It's part of the KaiNexus Continuous Improvement webinar series, and it's titled Leveraging a Strategy to Execution Framework, a Journey of Transformation. Hi, I'm Mark Graban. I am a senior advisor with KaiNexus. I'm the host and moderator today, and I'm really thrilled that we're joined by our presenter, Karen Fredenberg. You'll learn more about Karen in a minute. I'll more formally introduce her, but I want to thank Karen for being here. Thank everybody who's in attendance. If it's your first time attending, KaiNexus is an enterprise software company. We are passionate about spreading continuous improvement. And if you're curious about learning more about the problems we solve and the people we help and how we do that, please visit our website at kainexus.com. Okay, so with that for real, it's time to introduce our presenter, Karen Fredenberg, and she may add some other details as she gets started here. But Karen is the founder and managing director of Performance Improvement Consulting. Having worked both in consulting and within industry, Karen brings a unique perspective to strategy execution. Karen's been in executive roles, so having executable plans that deliver results is imperative, as she knows. She's built out and led strategic program management and operational excellence departments, leading large business and digital transformations. Karen's passionate about listening, connecting the dots, and bringing her experience in various industries, Lean Six Sigma, change management, design thinking, and other disciplines together to solve business problems and facilitate sustainable change. So Karen, again, thank you for bringing your time and experiences in your presentation here with us today. I'll hand things over to you. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone, for having me today. I'm excited to share my journey through various different transformations I've been through. And the strategy to execution framework from Performance Improvement Consulting. So let me get started with that. So, what is the strategy to execution framework? Like I said, we have been going through different transformations and working together with clients. Now, and hearing where their struggles are day to day, we developed this strategy to execution approach. It's designed to help organizations effectively implement and achieve their strategic objectives and achieve those sustainable results. Right. So to achieve that value that you see in the center there, it's a framework where you can look at it and say, where am I in this process? And where are maybe the gaps and where do I need to improve? So it's made up of 7 different parts. I'm going to focus a lot on the first part, which is strategy articulation, and also developing a culture of continuous improvement. You'll see that towards the end there is organizational change, but I want to make one point that people and culture change is crucial to this whole process of transformation. It really starts right from the beginning. So I'm going to delve into strategy articulation as well as organizational alignment a lot and how to set the stage of the culture of continuous improvement and really have to be thinking about people from the beginning, the middle, and the end through all pieces of this transformation. So we'll dive right in. So I'm also going to go back and forth between a real life example of a customer I am working with. They're a private label manufacturer and they're faced with mounting pressures to improve their profit margins and overall profitability. We're working with them on a whole scale end-to-end strategic transformation, and this includes culture change, operational and financial improvements. So we'll go back and forth between the theory and the actual real life examples as we talk about this. So step 1, strategy articulation. I love this quote from Stephen Covey of beginning with the end in mind, right? So a lot of times when I come into a company and start talking to them, we start talking about what is your strategy, mission, your vision, your values, and your purpose. Is that clear? A lot of times companies have that within their, on their website, or they might have that information, but really digging into that next level of detail is so important, right? Do the business units and departments have a strategy at that next level of detail that's aligned to the corporate strategy? And has that strategy at all levels been communicated clearly throughout the whole organization? So really dive deeply into that when we talk about strategy articulation. One way that we like to use is using design thinking to build a picture of what's going on in an organization. And we do this together with our teams. So the picture is built together, not only with just the C-level, but also looking deeper into the organization and testing it with people who are really working with the customers and on the lines, really to what is the North Star. Here's an example of a picture that we've used, really that gives us that picture of servicing the customer and having that as a North Star while supporting the lines. You'll see around it is different scorecards. I'm going to talk a lot about measurement and why measurements improve is really important here. And then the little clouds along the way are the strategic imperatives or strategic initiatives to start to really dive deeper into what does this mean to all the people. In the center of that heart, it says solving problems. And that's really building that culture of solving problems together with the people. And we're going to talk more about doing that really cross-functionally as a team. So like I said, setting the stage from the start is so important, and developing that culture of continuous improvement. And, doing that, we've done on our project is done that through some videos of training people. So you can look these up. There's 2 of them here. One is called Leadership is a Network, Not a Hierarchy. And what that helped to start to do is like everyone is a leader. To really solve these complex problems, we need to come together as a team. And we talk about the oval table, I'll talk about that a little bit more, but really solve those problems cross-functionally, everybody bringing something different to the table and bouncing ideas off each other. The other concept that we brought in from the beginning was this idea of a micro battle or test and learn. This has been a great way to take away the fear. Like when you're going through a huge transformation like this, it's very daunting. It's like a really daunting task. So this is a really easy way to say, let's take a little bite-sized pieces and not feel afraid. Okay, and if you fail, that's okay. That's a learning, and you learn from those mistakes. I know, Mark, you would love to talk about those mistakes that we learn from. So that was a crucial part of setting the stage and reiterating and reinforcing those same messages over and over. So I say communicate, communicate, and communicate more. So this is a great way to, again, learn how to win and scale. Also utilizing some different types of methods to be able to communicate using stories, some videos, and quotes as well. So one of the stories that we use is something called This is Water. I don't know if anybody is familiar with this story. You can kind of talk about it in the chat there if you've ever heard it. But it was the start to a commencement speech by David Foster Wallace. And the story goes a little like this. There are 2 young fish that are swimming in the water, and an older fish happens upon the 2 younger fish and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" The 2 young fish swim along, and then when they look at each other, and he says, "What the hell is water?" So what does that say to you? What did that story portray to you, right? And we really encourage people to pick their head up, look around, not only what's all around you in the water, that you're in the water, but looking from above, right? And what's in the whole ecosystem. And as we talk about strategy and strategy execution, so important, not only to be looking around about doing things differently, right? We all get into that autopilot mode, but also looking on what's going around in your whole, all around you with your competitors, with your customer, as well as within regulatory environments in the government and what's going on around the world. So that's really important. It was a great message, and that reiteration and create some language, right? It's create some language that we can all say, oh, this is water, and realize that we're getting in sort of that autopilot mode. The other is using videos, and many of you have seen this Think Different video with Steve Jobs and Apple, really looking at looking at the innovators and getting that creativity and that inspiration from those who think differently. And of course, many of you have probably heard the Albert Einstein quote that we use, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So again, doing the same things and not thinking differently really encourages people to be able to call it out, to enable this change process. So like I said, setting the culture and the change from the beginning is so imperative. So it's not like drilling down into what does this look like, strategy just on I think you said to me, Mark, just on a piece of paper, a book that we just put away and write and don't ever look at. But how do we start to make this real to our people? So here's some examples of just some basic strategic objectives that you may see in companies around customer service, improving customer service, or or increasing your profit margin or sales growth. And these get detailed out by department about how are they tying to those strategic imperatives, those strategic objectives, and then breaking those down into strategic initiatives. Some examples may be like a sales and operations planning. You may be going through a lean transformation, right? Many of you do that. Looking at strategic growth, like what type of new products are we bringing to the table? Where do we need to focus on that? A training and coaching program or automation. And again, those metrics and dashboards being important. So having those tools whether they be just basic measures, things I know getting data is sometimes so hard, or you have these tools that are able to give you these types of dashboards to see how you're doing, right? To be able to measure along the way and be able to course correct as needed. So that was a lot on strategy articulation to really set the stage. The next step in the process or in the overall framework, if you will, is organizational alignment. And this is just imperative, right? So making sure that everybody is aligned to those strategic goals. So here you see some of the types of functions that might be going on, and there's different ways of doing this, right? In the bottom right corner, I have the X matrix, which many of you, I'm sure, may utilize Hoshin planning, and the X matrix do this. And I really do like this methodology because it brings together all the critical pieces, right? Starting from what is that 3 to 5 year plan, to what are your annual objectives, to what are your initiatives, who is responsible for them, and how are you measuring them, and who else do you need help from in the organization to make it successful? So again, kind of really encapsulate some of these key messages and these key pieces that should be involved in any type of measure or any way that you may do this, right? That the objectives are not just done at the C-suite level, that they go down to the individual contributor level and back again and all around. So not only up and down, but also sideways, right? With your cross-functional partners, and making sure that you're aligned that way and having that discussion and back and forth. Also, those key performance measures. So how do we know? How do we know how we're doing at a company and a department level? What are those top level measures, and what are those cascading measures? What are the leading and lagging indicators that you may be seeing to know that we're going in the right direction, as I said before? And accountability. I use this term, who's wearing, I'm wearing a jacket today, who's wearing the jacket? And knowing that it's not only important to know, okay, who's going to drive these initiatives forward? But as I said, we all know that when you have large strategic initiatives, they can't be successful all on your own. But what are those interdependencies? Who do you need help from? So that we are all, again, rowing the boat in the same direction towards that North Star. Here's an example of what we did on this project called the OKR process, which some of you may be familiar with that, objectives and key results. So objectives are describing what an organization is looking to do, again, those goals, and the key results track the progress along the way and tie it into specific milestones and starts to tie into your initiatives. And we'll get more into the initiatives in a little bit. You can see it's cascaded and up and down from the company to the department level, down all the way to the individual. And it really allows for that transparency, the feedback loops, and a way for everybody to be aligned and tied to the strategy. One thing I'll say is I know people are probably at all different levels. Some people may be involved in your company strategy. Other people may be just at that individual contributor level and, going in day out. But, again, like one thing at this point is say, what is the strategy of my company? What is moving us forward? It's so much more rewarding, I think, to be able to, Mark and I were talking about this and when we talked earlier about it's really rewarding to be able to know how your individual achievements are contributing to the overall company and goals, right? And to be able to say that you're you're playing a big part in this. So I think that's really something that everybody can do, is if you don't already know this, tying back to what is your strategy and how are you making a difference. So now we get into the next part of initiatives and actions. And this has been started a little bit at a high level. Earlier, as I mentioned, some of you maybe have some idea of what some of those strategic imperatives are, or some of those initiatives. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the idea of a transformation management office. These are really the orchestrator of the change, and it helps to ensure the company's efforts are aligned to the strategic goals and that you're executing to the strategy effectively, right? We're doing this in a quick way, in the most efficient way. Again, the strategic initiatives, defining them and then prioritizing them, really spending time on what is adding value to your strategy, what is adding value to the organization, and making sure that we align on those, what needs to come first, what needs to come second, maybe come third, or what needs to happen all at the same time. So in a big transformation like the one that I'm referring to, there's a lot of things happening, but if you have competing resources, that's where you can really, this transformation and management office can help with those types of priorities. So projects are defined at all different levels, breaking it down from large programs to projects, initiatives, and even those Kaizen events that I know many of you work on, those Kaizen events, whether those be weekly sprints or those take a little bit longer. The impact of those initiatives are measured to allow for that performance monitoring. And again, this drives a culture of accountability and collaboration. So we start to really develop what are those initiatives and actions and who's doing what, getting down into the detail. The next step is the operational alignment. So many of you I know are lean practitioners. So I think this is where lean really shines and continuous improvement really shines. Because a lot of times in strategic planning, we may just state the problem at a very high level, such as, we have a customer service issue. We're not delivering our products on time to our customers. But this is where the lean tools can really come in, right? By asking why, going into the 5 whys and delving deeper into that. And using things like DMAIC, right? Are we defining, measuring, and analyzing before we go through and start taking action? What I found is people who don't really have a lean background might just go right into, okay, this is the answer, rather than starting to look at the data and what are we doing today and gathering and doing some analyzing first. So taking a little time to making sure we're going in the right direction and then moving forward with process improvement. Also making sure that those operations are aligned to the goals. So, and your strategy, right? So if you really have a large, again, kind of going back to this customer service piece, are our operations and our processes aligned to being easy to do business with our customers, for example. So that's where operational alignment comes in. Next, we talk about execution, right? Now we're in this execute with excellence. And I mentioned before that transformation management office, but you may not have that in your organization. But it is important to say who is responsible for managing the execution of the strategy. I really do think to be successful, that you need to have either a person or a team responsible for that. And again, they're orchestrating that, tracking status, helping you with any roadblocks that you may be coming up upon, and helping to prioritize and orchestrate the whole strategy and all the change that's happening. So this may be, I said, if you have something like a transformation office or maybe a more traditional PMO or even a chief of staff, that's something that I see quite often in companies in the technology space. But the key piece that's really different about the transformation office is it's not only the governance of making sure that you're following the projects on time, but these are people with real business acumen who can solve problems and are deep in the organization, helping to solve the problems as we go along. Also, that change management piece, I think that is, again, so crucial there in the green. I keep calling it green because I think it's so important. But has that part built into it, right? So we know that we can develop processes and maybe technology, but if we don't bring people along for the journey, we're not going to be successful and get that value. And again, the last piece of it is that performance monitoring, having a way to say, are these projects successful? Are they meeting the objectives that we set forth? I often say, that we do projects for a reason. We don't just do them to be on time and on budget. We do them to deliver the business results. And this is a way of measuring that along the way. So here's an example of how we structure it with this transformation I'm talking to you about. Structuring it into work streams is a really nice way to do that. Here's some examples of some work streams, like a commercial work stream, the operations work stream, supply chain, and innovation. And then breaking down the operations work team into smaller pieces. Like I said, lean transformation, quality management, automation, and safety. These work streams are really like their own agile teams that have a cross-functional representation, including all the other business partners I need, as well as information technology and data to help them to analyze and solve problems. So those are key pieces. Those initiatives that of the work streams are created are tracked on a weekly basis as part of the work stream meetings, right? You may have been part of these, but looking at status and again, looking at those roadblocks and solving problems with a team along the way every week, making sure that we're staying on track and holding everybody accountable. But strategy execution is not a one and done. You need to be able to review, adapt, and improve as you go along. So the use of the scorecards and keeping an eye on what's happening in the business landscape is imperative. So what's changing internally as well as externally. So internally, things may change, or the projects that you're doing may not be moving you in the direction that you need to get to that North Star. And using that information to pivot and change is really important. Also, things may change in your business landscape, both internally. You may have a merger or acquisition that may change your priorities or change the direction or how fast you're going towards those. Also, so important to keep looking at what's going on externally, right? What's happening with your customers? What's happening with your competitors? Are the things changing in the business landscape, like things in regulatory? Or, are we going through a war or when we had a global pandemic a couple of years ago. Those are all things that have changed your plans, but the objectives don't change. It just may change the course and the path that you're going down. This is an example of how we've used Agile and some sprints to be able to break this down into smaller pieces, which I think has been a really great way to do it, rather than thinking about it really big bang. And like I said, it's that test and learn and that breaking down into smaller pieces. So I was talking before about that operations work stream and under the lean transformation, really breaking down into like the sources of loss. What are those sources of loss and the changeovers and scrap and downtime? And what are some Kaizen events or other type of lean tools that we can bring together, like SMED or 5S, or looking at the scrap where they damage raw materials, working with suppliers, where were they getting damaged, or in downtime, things like preventative maintenance and focusing on that. So we've broken these down into 30-day sprints, which has been helpful to be able to take, again, manageable pieces and execute on them, and then measure and adjust and identify if there's new opportunities identified for the next sprint, not locking yourself into just one way of doing things, but saying, okay, now we have new information. Now it's easy to pivot and then adjust and execute again. So that brings us towards the end here. Like I said, organizational change. And like I said from the start, people need to be thought about from the beginning, the middle, and the end. And I wanted to share with you a methodology that I like to use called the ProSci methodology. It has two pieces, ADKAR, which is at the top, and it stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And this is the way that people absorb individual change, if you think about it at the people level, right? And at the bottom is a three-step approach of prepare for change, manage the change, and reinforce and sustain the outcomes. So let me talk you through this a little bit. You know, every time, whether you're talking about the big T transformation or just every time that things are changing for our people, making sure that we're thinking about what's changing, who is it impacting, how and by how much, right? And are we making them aware of what's changing through communication? Are we making sure that they know why the change is happening and they have the desire to change and they want to change with you? So that's through communication and coaching as well. Do they have the knowledge to change? Do they know how to change? And that's training. And then giving them the time to create the ability. So not just training and say, okay, we trained you, see you later, but saying, okay, we're giving you the chance to try it. Try it maybe in a sandbox environment, try it in a low risk way and coaching them along the way. And then that reinforcement is so key, right? Making sure that it sticks. And that can be done by celebrating wins, as well as by doing other types of reinforcement of measuring and saying, okay, are changes actually happening? Are the behaviors changing? And then being able to adapt and change as you need to. Do we need more training? Do we need more coaching? Do we need more communication? So this goes back and forth and ebbs. It's not really a sequential, right? You go back and forth and see, where do I need to go back and do I need to shore this up again? Okay, so kind of thinking through again, the prepare for change, what's changing, and getting feedback. What type of change management plans do I need? Communication, training, coaching, resistance management, and then making sure that you reinforce those behaviors at the end, and don't forget to celebrate the wins along the way in small and big ways, right? This can be monetary and non-monetary. It can be, just by a pat in the back or people seeing things in town hall meetings, right? Recognition in town hall meetings. Great way to communicate in your daily meetings that you have with people, just continuing to keep it top of mind. Before I kind of wrap things up here, I wanted to share two key learnings that I think are really important to setting the stage and getting people comfortable with change and making mistakes. And here I have the quote from Mark of make small mistakes early, learn, adjust, and succeed, from his books, The Mistakes That Make Us. I thought that was like a perfect quote for this. So again, I talked to you about the test and learn, right? A way for us to develop the culture and the language and that psychological safety to try things, to take action, learn from them, and pivot and adjust. And that is just such a great part of continuous improvement. And then again, that leadership as a network, really encouraging people to have a voice. It's a way of also getting away the stigma of bringing problems up and bringing up the mistakes and saying, okay, we're going to solve the problem here. And you have this team, this oval table to do that with you, and putting the problem at the center rather than people taking it personally and think it's the person that we're attacking. So again, it's really important. I know Mark talks a lot about that psychological safety, and that has been a key tool for us. So that takes us to the end here. And I say rinse and repeat, because I think I see this, I created this as a circular process, but really it ebbs and flows, right? It's not really sequential. And almost to think about it, almost like a figure eight or like an infinity sign going back and forth, because it's not just something you do one time a year. You should be living and breathing this. You may be saying, okay, I'm down and executing. I need to go back and get more organizational alignment. I need to do more communication. I need to pivot on our initiatives as you get more information, and you're doing this on a regular basis, whether that be you're looking at it weekly, whether you're looking at it monthly or quarterly, but having that cadence in place is important as well. And that concludes. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Karen. A lot to talk about here during the Q&A session. So I know I've got some questions. I'll encourage people to continue submitting questions. We'll get to that in a minute. You can see Karen's contact info here. Email address will be up on screen during the Q&A, and I've also put links to her LinkedIn profile, her email, and her firm into the chat if you want to keep those or use them at some point. So before we get into the Q&A, just a couple quick announcements. This webinar is part of a monthly series. I'm still trying to get webinars for the rest of the year lined up. If you're in the audience and you have something you would like to present for our community, you can reach out to me, Mark at KaiNexus.com, or if you know somebody in your network to nominate to present something, let me know. I think August 21st, I'm going to do an experiment with sort of a flipped webinar where I'm going to ask people to watch a 30-minute webinar that I recorded recently with the Shingo Institute about psychological safety and continuous improvement. And then when we get together live, I'll do a real brief recap. We'll do some live polling, and we'll spend a lot of time with Q&A. So if you've registered for this webinar, you'll get an email when registration opens for that. If you have never seen any of our KaiNexus webinars, we've got over 120 in our KaiNexus Webinars on Demand library. You can access all of those for free by going to kainexus.com/webinars. Click on the big button that says KaiNexus Webinars on Demand, or you can also go to our KaiNexus YouTube channel and find them all there. Next, please. We invite you to come check out our blog, blog.kainexus.com. A couple of posts every week related to all things continuous improvement. So I encourage you to come and check those out, or even sign up to receive blog posts via email. And then finally, want to tell you about or remind you of the KaiNexus podcast, where the audio from Karen's session and the Q&A will be in the podcast feed if you want to revisit that or share it. And we have all sorts of other interesting things in our podcast feed. You can learn more at kainexus.com/podcast, or go to your favorite podcast app and just search KaiNexus. Okay, so with that, we'll just bring up, final thing. We really do look at your feedback. I know sometimes we all get surveyed to death. When you are ready to leave this webinar, it will prompt you to fill out a survey. We encourage you to fill those out. We do read those. We do pass along feedback to our presenters, including Karen. And there's a couple of questions in there that are really important about topics that you would like to hear covered in our webinar series. So please do, if you can, sometime today, take a minute or two with that survey. Okay, and then for real, we will go into Q&A. All right. So let's start with a question that came in from Fortune. How does Karen use Toyota Kata? Or I guess we could ask, do you, or in what ways, or to what extent, do you use Toyota Kata in your strategy creation and execution approach?
No, I would say in the execution, from what I know about Toyota Kata, I'm not the expert in that, but from what I know about Toyota Kata, it's the coaching, right? And the Gemba, the idea of the Gemba walks and really getting in with the people. So I think from a perspective of the strategy really only lives within the people, and that's who knows what's going on. So again, I can't reiterate enough that it's so important not to create strategy just like in a conference room, but so important to get to Gemba and go and see what's happening, not only on the line, and then also talking to your customers, see what's happening again with your, what's going on with competitors, what's going on in the industry with those changes that's happening. So I think that's a very important aspect of it. And then seeing that it's actually being executed, right? So that continuous communication and coaching and saying, okay, this is how what you're doing is connecting to achieving the strategy is also, I think, would be an interesting part of the coaching part of Kata.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one thing that stood out to me from what you shared, Karen, was the idea of this, being an iterative process, of being a cycle. So I was going to ask related to that, what are your thoughts on helping executives shift from thinking about strategy as being like very certain and linear, as opposed to thinking or trying to get more comfortable with it being uncertain and iterative, like just the change management aspect of.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the data. I think actually also looking at the data that it should be looked at on a regular basis. Like I said, whether you look at it, very frequently, all the time, or at least at a minimum quarterly, looking at it, that it's not just a straight path. And understanding what those bumps along the way could be, right? Understanding and being open and transparent. I think that transparency about what those bumps along the way are, and how to manage for those and what is causing them. So I think, your question of it's definitely not linear, but looking and seeing and digging into the why, again, I guess maybe I go back to the 5 whys and root cause, like what may be causing you not to achieve your North Star? Do you need to do it in a different way? Is it around your people? Is it how we're going about it? Do we need to structure things in a little bit of a different way? And constantly that continuous improvement cycle, which I know we all love, and we all love to talk about it, right? But that is also very important with the executives. And I know that those that I work with on a regular basis, that's something what we talk about a lot, is what is changing and how do we need to pivot and adjust as we go along.
Yeah. And as we're going along, it seems like one of the challenges is looking partway through a year of saying, okay, well, we're underperforming against our goals and objectives and improvement aims. Do we need to iterate the strategy, or do we need to improve the execution? I mean, that's a $1 million or $1 billion question in some organizations. I mean, it might be easier to say, well, the execution is the problem. Like, how would you kind of try to root cause that, of how much it's a need to change strategy versus improve execution?
Yeah. So again, diving deeper into the data, both financially and operationally, and then looking to see, do we need to do things differently? Like maybe we thought, like I said, at the very big, like one of the parts around operational alignment, I think I talked about it. What I've seen happen is we just dive right into a solution. Well, maybe that wasn't the right solution. Maybe that wasn't actually addressing the problem that you need addressed, and isn't allowing us to achieve those goals. Again, whether they're financial goals, whether they're just strategic goals of how fast you're going to launch a product, or how well a product's going to do, or whatever that might be. And then looking at it, doing it a different way. So being open, I think, being open to doing it in a different way. Like I said, that this is water, right? Doing things different, and that whole piece. Yeah. That has to emanate, like your whole, and that alignment at the organizational alignment and leadership level has to all believe that, really, believe that that's the way to do things. And then, what do? Do you need to bring in maybe an expert? You may need to bring in an expert to help you think about something in a little bit of a different way, or again, dive deeper into the information, the data, or we got new data, right, to help us figure things out. So, and then I think it's multidimensional, but I think that root cause analysis, and then being open to the change and making of the course corrections, and then just getting everybody aligned again and say, okay, we're going to be taking a little bit of a pivot, a little bit of a change here.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, Karen, because I think we've got time, and while you're talking about, kind of cycles and iterating, would you mind jumping back to at the very end, you had the version of that cycle you showed at the beginning, right here. I was going to ask you, since we've got the time, could you talk through this in a little bit more detail? I don't know if you have like an example in mind, or but I mean, I think it would help to if you could even step through those 7 steps one at a time.
I'll step through them one at a time with an
Yeah,
example.
yeah.
Um, sure. You want to give me one? You want to give me an idea?
Oh, let's see. I don't know. I'm thinking of I don't know if this is if this is the kind of example you're looking for. Let's say a manufacturing company that is trying to improve its market share from 20 to 30% as a
Okay,
strategic imperative for um, growing the company and being more sustainable.
perfect. Great.
Is that
That's a great
okay?
example, right?
Okay. Okay.
So, really, then I would say, within your strategy, one of the key strategic imperatives may be strategic growth, right? There may
Mhm.
be strategic growth. So, how are you going to go about doing that? And that would be really in your strategy articulation and in your initiatives, thinking about it from that top line perspective. Is it new products? Is it
Mhm.
penetrating current customers, with the existing products you have, right? Is it international expand? Is it a type of expansion? Like how are you represented, across in the country in the country, or maybe you need to go internationally. So what are those? What are all those options? Again, that brainstorming sort of up front of what are all those pieces, getting the data together and saying we think we're going to go after really product development and doing that
Mhm.
quickly and bringing innovation. That's the thing that we're really going to be making sure that's going to be focused on, and then making sure that we penetrate those new products with our existing customers. So then who else of course, it's going to be very R&D, it may be very R&D
Mhm.
related, innovation related, but you need to make sure that everybody is aligned to that, right? Everybody's aligned to those strategies. And how do you bring new product to market? How do we commercialize it with our sales team, right? How are we training people how to sell it? Then you think about how are we getting it? How are we going to get it manufactured, right? What do we need to do to get it manufactured? Do we need to develop new technology for that? All the way through really from end to end, so that those new product introductions meet the goals that you think they're going to be, right? And setting those financial goals to get started. So those might be some of the initiatives and actions, and that operational alignment and organizational alignment of like, what does everybody need to do cross-functionally to make that happen? What were those goals, right? Whether it was speed or the amount of sales those new products had, or how much penetration those new products had. So that would be there. And then you're reviewing that and seeing how is that working? Is that making a difference, which is review and adapt. And then making sure everybody understands their place in it and what they need to do to change. Like, maybe your issue was it takes you a year and a half to create a new product. I don't know, something like that to launch a new product. We want to shrink that to 6 months, right? What is everybody understands the change, the need for change, because they're going to have to do things differently to be able to achieve that goal.
Mhm. And as you were talking, and I was thinking about what I had thrown out there, I think I confused a goal with a strategy. So I think I probably came in at the middle. We're going to increase market share from 20 to 30%. Well, we could ask, well, why? Why is that a strategic imperative? And then how? So I think when you started breaking that down into, well, is that going to be new product development? Is that expanding within existing customers? I think from where I started, you kind of helped move me
Yeah, you actually
up
you
the
have to start,
chain
where's the gap,
and
right? You have to
down.
think back,
Yeah.
think a little bit backwards and a little bit, and then forwards too, right?
Hmm.
Absolutely. So I think that's what this kind of does, is let you say like, okay, I'm out here executing, or I have this objective, but did I go all the way back to the beginning,
Hmm.
right? Of why and how, and that you have those alignments in place as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, there's another question, and we've got a couple from the audience we're going to come back to. We use the word in imperatives. Like how do you lead a discussion around like what's truly an imperative and a need versus a want or a nice to have when we're trying to kind of allocate scarce resources when it comes to execution?
Yeah. Well, I think again, maybe it goes back to your example, Mark, right? Of what are you trying to achieve?
Hmm.
Um, obviously every company's goal is to make money, right? It basically is to make money, but you can do that in different ways, and it depends on your organization what's the more important part of that. And like, for example, in your part, we said, well, maybe the most important thing, the strategic imperative for my company right now is growth. And I'm going to do growth. Really, that's really what's the most important. That's the most important, because if we grow first, then we can come back and make it more cost effective and more, more operationally lean later. As that example.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the strategic imperative. So that would mean everyone really is aligned on that's the most important thing. So something else that maybe you may be doing that is maybe making the company more efficient, maybe taking a backseat right now, maybe right now. Or it may be the opposite. We're saturated on sales. Like that might be the opposite way. We're saturated on sales, and really it's most important that we look to be efficient and cut our costs to become more profitable. That might be more of the way to do it. Or you're doing a little bit of both, right? But it's kind of looking at where is the opportunity in the market to be able to grow, and aligning that in your strategy, and then everybody aligned to those imperatives, because not everything is imperative, right? Not everything is important. That's the whole idea of prioritization. You can't be that way, or you don't really have a strategy if you don't dig deeper and say, these truly are the priorities, and this is how we're determining the North Star, what is important. So in that example, like I was giving before of the customers, like the North Star is customer service. Like then that comes first. And that's the thing that you satisfy first. It's like, a bit of your God, or your, who you're looking to go to first. So that's what I would say. The difference between a need and a want.
Yeah. And you're making me think of something I've heard people say, if everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority.
Absolutely.
Can't have too many quote unquote top priorities, too many initiatives. I was going to ask a follow-up question, maybe along those lines. Like, what can we do to help make sure that we don't have too many metrics, or at least an overwhelming number of metrics to review at the top strategic level?
That's a really good question. So I think, again, aligning it to that strategy. And I think I shared the idea of the balanced scorecard. But what are the imperative few that you are balanced though in that, right? Whether that's financially, operationally, around your people as well, and your customers, right? So that you're focused on those four quadrants and picking the vital few. Now, not everybody can understand how what they're doing day to day contributes to those vital key performance indicators, right? So that's where you get into a lot other ones that are cascading down. But what are the ones that are going to that are maybe the most visible? And I think you have to look at what's easy for you to also measure. And like I said, data is hard to get. Data is really hard to get at. Getting those dashboards is not an easy thing. So sometimes it's like, well, what can I measure? And then how does that? What are the few that I'm going to pick that is going to have an impact on those higher level measures as well?
Yeah, and I've seen some organizations get into the trap of like what's easy to measure is not necessarily the most important thing.
That's right.
To measure.
Yeah.
There's a question here from Scott. Let me shift over to this question. Karen, have you utilized the playing to win approach? I think Roger Martin and A.G. Lafley, or OKRs. You mentioned OKRs for strategy development within organizations, and if so, what are the pros and cons of each approach? So is the playing the win approach something you've used? I've only barely heard of it.
I'm not familiar with it, so I'd love to learn. I have to write that one down to learn more about it. Maybe we can get a little bit of information, Mark, and I can say it's very similar to something that I've used. I mentioned the OKRs. Was that the other question there, Mark?
Yeah. Can you maybe expand a little on OKRs since we have the time?
For sure. So, utilizing OKRs as a way to disseminate the strategy and the execution. It's been a nice way because it's simple. It's nice and simple. I think it's been a good way to do it. What are those objectives? Again, what are those strategic imperatives? What are the objectives that tie to those, right? So I think you usually have 3 or so, like major strategic objectives. What are then your departmental and then your individual objectives that tie to those? And how are we going to measure results? and then tying it into the action. So it is a little bit of, SMART goals, but also understanding that what you're doing is having an impact on the measures to improve the business. So and it being stretch goals, right? It being something that you don't do every day, but these are the assignments that are moving the needle to move the strategy forward. So it's been a nice way of everybody being aligned because everybody has the same strategic objectives at the high level, but how they then interpret it for their own departments and their own individuals are different, and they're making sure that they're aligned across. Again, I think, any way that you can communicate the strategy via your performance management process, whether it be OKRs, like I said, I've used something called Plan on a Page, which is the similar idea, but it was all on one page. I really like the X Matrix, I think, does it as well. But the way that you can say this is how the strategy ties to what you're doing every day. And it's been a great experience to do it that way via the OKRs.
Okay. Thanks. And I know we have some KaiNexus customers using OKRs. We have some organizations, some customers using X Matrix approach. So yeah, there's all these different frameworks. And I put a link in the chat. There's an HBR page about that book, Playing to Win, that includes a link to a webinar about that topic for those who would like to check that out. There's a question here from Robert, speaking of X Matrix. He asks, when developing your corporate strategy and your X Matrix, this can oftentimes be a top-down approach. What examples can you suggest to also include a bottom-up approach to ensure buy-in and ownership from direct reports? Would you do that during the tactics and development stage or other stages?
Yeah, I think it kind of ebbs and flows, to be honest. I think ideally you would do it sort of in that organizational alignment to initiatives and actions phase as you're determining the strategy and, again, those strategic imperatives. It's a kind of like I think it's a cascading, right? It's a cascading down so I don't want it to sound top down, but it is saying, okay, here are really the strategy and what we're going after from a high level. And then the department leads each working with their teams, right? The department leads working with their teams to say, okay, now here's how we translate that to what we do every day, right? And then sharing that across the oval table. And then it is a bottoms up again, right? I think it is that catchball that you guys use that term, catchball, and with Hoshin planning. So same idea. Okay, all right. Well, but I have this additional idea, or I have at the individual contributor level, maybe you could think about it this way. And it may just be a little bit more about how you go about executing a strategy, or a little bit more of the tactics, and again, those initiatives and actions. And that's where the great ideas come from. I think getting this deep in the organization is like a really important aspect. And doing that via, I know that, getting things on the floor and understanding what those ideas are all the way up into maybe your departmental level, and then and sharing those back and forth. And everybody understanding that they need to help each other with that, because maybe there's things you could just go do it. And there are things that you need help with. IT definitely comes to mind as being one that, often gets tapped on, but others as well, other cross-functional partners that you need help to make it successful. So for sure, I've seen it done that way. And it's iterative in nature. Again, it's sort of like not just one and done and put on a shelf and said, okay, this is it. It's living and breathing. And I see that be successful.
Yeah, and I think that's just, that word iterative is such a key word, as I've been taught and finally maybe come to understand a little bit, through my career of, and I as I look at this diagram, this 7-step cycle, I think you were saying a couple of minutes ago, you mentioned it being a figure 8. And what that makes me think of, let me check with you if I'm hearing you right, is there's this high level cycle, but as we go from, let's say, we'll start at the top, strategy articulation, organizational alignment, initiatives and actions. Now that we're starting to sketch that out, maybe we now notice some problems with organizational alignment. We may need to loop back within the cycle. I see you nodding your head.
That's right.
For those who are just listening on the podcast. Okay. So say more about that.
Yeah. So it's almost like, right, yeah, definitely, as you're diving deeper in to understanding, especially like the operations, right? Once you really get deeper into the problems, you're going to uncover more. So you only know like a certain amount when you're getting started, right? And you have these ideas, it's sort of like your experiments, like you're right, you have your idea of what it's going to end up being. But as you dive deeper, you might find out more. So you need to kind of come back again. Organizational alignment is a huge one of them. And then re-communicate again, right? Communicate again, re-communicate again. Who do I need help with? We're going at it a different way. For sure, when you review and adapt and improve, right? For sure, there you're going to be saying, I'm looking at the data. It's giving me a different way. I may do different initiatives and actions. Like my initiatives and actions may change. So, as you're going through and you are determining where you have some of those gaps and those needs, and it's ebbing back and forth. It's not, again, not really linear and sequential. They're kind of all happening at the same time.
Yeah.
In little mini iterations.
Yeah. And then, it seems like a framework like this, or maybe, I don't know if you would want to frame it, Karen, and some of the other frameworks you shared, but I think one scenario that comes up a lot is, an organization leaders say, all right, we're going to launch a lean transformational initiative or an operational excellence initiative. Initiatives and actions. It seems like that statement could then maybe benefit from being taken in a few other directions. It'd be the kind of, back to, I don't know, why and how, or would you use
Exactly.
what questions would you ask, or would you use this framework to steer that directive into something that's more iterative and more productive?
Yeah, exactly. Like I think you're saying, Mark, right? The first is, rather than saying, oh, we're doing a lean transformation, the first question is why? The first question is, how is that tied to what you want to achieve as an organization?
Right.
What are those higher level goals? Because you could go at it number one, you could go at it so many different ways, right? There's so many different ways to go at it. And is it the right thing to do? Is it the right thing to do right now? Like I was saying before, it may not be where you're putting your resources. So, so that's why I said, okay, well, that's helpful to know. Back to the why, back to then that helps you to say the how, right? So knowing the why first helps you to say then, okay, well, then maybe I would structure it this way. This is where we really need to get started. You may need the structure first. You may say, oh, we really have a problem in this one area. We really have an issue with this one plant. We really have an issue in this. Maybe it's not in the manufacturing. Maybe is it across the whole organization, right? Because we talk about lean not only in manufacturing, right, in the back office as well. And is that where maybe we want to utilize lean, but really we're focused on customer service right now because we have a major issue there, and we're going to follow it through the end-to-end business process kind of lean way. So I think starting with what the major issues are, and I talked about that before, like understanding then why, and then what tools to use comes later, or what are the right ways to structure the initiatives comes from that.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. There's one other question. I was going to go back and see if Mohammed could try restating that question a little bit, because I was trying to think how to ask that. So maybe I'll wait for a kind of resubmission of that question. But maybe Karen, if you could just jump back ahead to the very end slide for those who are still back on here, remind people of your contact info if they might want to reach out via email or LinkedIn or through your website if there are specific follow-up questions. A couple comments coming in that I'll share. Scott says, thanks for answering my question. Susan says, webinar was excellent. Thanks for a great speaker, great resources, and fantastic facilitation. We had a suggestion from Fortune to do a session on lean tech with Fabrice Bernard and Sandrine Olivencia on lean product. Thank you for that idea, Fortune. If you're still on, if you could help make introductions, that would be helpful and appreciated. So to everybody who's on, thank you again for attending today. Please do fill out the feedback survey that will pop up at the end here. But Karen, before we wrap up, let me turn things over to you. Is there anything else that you would like to share? Any kind of like final advice for people in the audience here today? How's that for a very, very, very open-ended question?
A very open-ended question. No, I think just taking the step back and thinking like, where am I in this journey, right? Where are the struggles that either I'm dealing with? I know there's people who've said, "What fix what what bugs you," right? What is it that you taking the time to reflect? What is it that is causing you issues, wherever you may be on this journey? And then kind of thinking about this, hopefully you can utilize this framework to go back and say, okay, well, maybe I need to, again, think about how do I connect it to strategy? Can I use some of that organizational and operational alignment to help along the way and change management? And just figuring out where you are in your journey, and hopefully can help your companies along as well on your own journeys of transformation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for that. Thanks for your presentation. And maybe then as a final wrap up here, Mohammed followed up. Okay, what are your thoughts on convincing leadership to transform from their traditional ways to an operational excellence-based approach? I'm reading your mind, you're going to say data. You've said a couple of times. What else? I mean, how would you answer that question?
Maybe seeing some successes. I think if you can get some small wins, I talk about that with change, like the smaller wins and seeing it take root, even if you want to start a little bit more bottoms up versus a coming top down, saying, look, this is what's happening, showing pictures, show videos, take people out there and see what's happening. It's really inspiring, to be honest. And I think then once your leaders get it, I happen to have a great CEO I'm working with that really understands the importance of it. But if you don't, then I think showing them and showing the other leaders the power that this can bring, I think that's gone a long way as well.
Yeah. Baby steps, small wins.
Stories.
Great approach, using those stories. Yes. All right. Well, thank you again. So again, our presenter, Karen Fredenberg, thank you for joining us here today. Lynn says thank you. This was really interesting. So thank you, everyone who attended, and I hope you'll join us next month and future months for ongoing webinars. So on behalf of the team at KaiNexus, thank you for joining us today. And Karen, thank you for your time and your expertise today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.